Whether you keep them in your home or love to see them in theirs, these are the creatures that bring us all together.
Reptiles. We're going to be delving into the experiences of reptile lovers from around the block and around the world. This is the Reptile Talk Podcast. Boom. What is going on, everybody? This is Jeremy Turgeon from Brassman Reptiles.
And I'm Rob, and I'm keeping it real.
And we have a very, very exciting episode tonight. If you saw the previews all over social media, we're talking with the USARK gang. We have a USARK takeover happening.
This is like a full USARK takeover.
It really is. USARK Florida and USARK Nationals in the building. They're all in the same room, and that means they're all in Florida, which means they're all upset. And
I would be too.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm definitely excited to have all of these guys here. We're going to get some real-time live updates on what's going on both in Florida, and if Phil wants to deviate from Florida negativity, we can talk about national negativity, because I know I already see him rocking in his chair.
I mean, yeah.
But we're going to get some live updates from all of them, which is always great to be able to get you guys that information. As always, guys, thank you so much to everybody that's already in the chat.
Thank you.
Facebook, please make sure you guys share this video out to as many different people and places as possible. And we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get these guys in here and get it going. Bam. What's up, everybody? They're all dancing. What did you do to them, Rob?
Rob did it.
I have a good influence on people. That's what my mom always told me.
Contagical, the real word, maybe.
It is tonight.
Oh gosh. Okay, so you guys are all in Florida right now. So
we should say that we thank the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission for providing us with this lovely room to podcast from.
They're recording you right now.
Yeah.
Probably. It's okay.
They may have kicked us out of one room before they set us up in this room.
It wasn't bugs. This one is.
Right.
So we have to be on our best behavior this evening.
Nonsense.
We've already, that ship has sailed.
That was way long time ago today.
Oh gosh. Okay, so for everybody who might be wondering why you're all in Florida together, why are you all in Florida together right now, guys?
Elizabeth is up.
Oh, we are here for a technical advisory group meeting. So we have different industries coming together with FWC, and we're talking about potential new rules and regulations.
That sounds like wonderfulness.
We're on meeting number 8 in the last year and a half. So this is number 8 two-day meeting. Yes.
Sheesh.
So
yeah, it sounds like so much fun.
This was the worst one yet, if that matters for anyone.
Oh, it matters. I knew it couldn't be great because Phil's demeanor is subpar.
Really, this was the first one. I'm unsure why we had the first 7. So finally,
Yeah.
right, we're getting somewhere.
And he's in a lot better mood. We all are than we were all day.
That's good. That's definitely good that the moods have picked up. But I think that's just because there are non-FWC people in the room with you right now. So
Fair enough. That might be accurate also.
Oh gosh. So they're coming up with new rules. Discussions are happening. What transpired today? What's the latest that you're able to tell us? Because I don't know if there's any red tape. Of course, it's Florida. There's red tape everywhere, but you know.
Yeah. Well, basically at the last, this kind of stems from what happened at the last FWC commission meeting. We thought it was going to be kind of a fairly boring affair. FWC staff was going to give an update on how the tag meetings were going, and we thought everybody was just kind of thank everybody for working together, and we're working on this, and we'll see you next time. And it really turned into something completely different. Some of the environmental stakeholders who some of which were also members of the tag were there, and they told the commission to close the border of Florida, shut this down. And the commissioners joined in, and it turned into rah, we need to shut this thing down. But it kind of ended up being that the commissioners came around and said, well, we're going to come up with a plan that in the near term, you just can't bring anything new into Florida. So it'll just be shut down to for anything new. So we don't want Florida shut down at all, but at least that was a little comforting that it didn't seem like they were going to come after the things that we already worked with. But today we were blindsided a little bit again with FWC's staff's interpretations of what the commissioner said at the meeting. And one of these interpretations was that we're going to shut everything down that hasn't been evaluated by FWC, and it just won't be able to come into Florida until we pass other regulations. So, and in FWC, I think they said they'd evaluated 130 species so far.
Class 1,
Yeah, so the vast majority of species have not been evaluated at all. So that would close down just about our whole industry if they went with that approach. Yeah.
Aquaculture, yeah, for real.
Mammals and birds. Remember, this is not just reptiles.
So just to give you some quick numbers. So for all animals in trade, we're so aquaculture, herpetoculture, mammals, aviculture, you're looking at 30,000 species in trade, 30,000. So there's a scientist, Dr. Hill, who's here on the tag with us, and he said 205 have been evaluated. So 205 of 30,000. So as Daniel said, we had interpretation 1, which really wasn't too bad. We have to supply them with a list of species in trade. If it's not on that list, it has to be reviewed. But their interpretation number 2 said, if it's not one of those 205 species, the other 29,800 cannot be imported into Florida.
Wow. So basically they're like, everything's guilty until proven innocent.
And for aquaculture, that's looking at 70 to 80% of their trade, because aquaculture relies a lot more on imports than herpetoculture does.
Right.
Still a fair amount of herpetoculture, but that would shut down aquaculture overnight if they go this route.
And we have to remember, importation is not just from other countries; it's from other states.
Other states,
so if you're in South Carolina and you bring something into Florida, you're importating. It's an importation. So with that being said, it's everywhere in the United States coming into Florida and other countries coming in.
Wow.
Jesus.
So that's why we got a little worked up today. So
that's a fair reason to get worked up. So I did an Instagram live maybe like a week ago, and the whole premise was talking about why we fight so hard when it comes to defining terms to reduce the potential for interpretation like this. You know, we want these clear definitions, both for the terms of understanding the regulation, but also for penalties, so that we understand what's happening, why it's happening, and if it goes through, what's going to happen to you. And it needs to be very clear and concise. And when we don't get that, this is the potential that we end up with. And as soon as leadership changes hands, that interpretation opens right back up to whoever is going to take charge. So that's incredibly disheartening.
Yeah. We didn't say in the beginning, we don't know where this is going to go. We're just reporting what happened today. So we're going to see one of those alternatives. We speculate what's going to happen is they're probably going to present both of those alternatives to the commission at the May FWC commission meeting, and then they'll probably decide, which unfortunately, if they do that, they're probably going to go with alternative 2, which is far worse than alternative 1. But again, right now, we're not sure which direction it's going to go.
Right.
And it should also be pointed out that of the animal keeper representatives on the committee, there was not a single one of them that was for any of this stuff. They do not have the consent of any of the animal industry or animal keepers. And there was very little comment today from the animal rights folks on the committee and the environmental interests. It was mostly industry and animal keeper representatives that were speaking up, and it was not positive comments. It was negative. So if they pass this, it's going to be very obviously without the consent of the governed.
Right.
It seems like there's more and more of that happening over the last year or two, where we've got all these people standing up saying, hey, we don't want this. And the government's like, well, we're just going to do it anyway. Like, we know better than you. So you can just go back to doing whatever you're doing. Go play in your sandbox. and we're just gonna do whatever we want.
Pretty much. And
Pretty accurate.
and not only that, they kind of acted like they were going to bring a draft rule to the meeting coming up in May.
Wow.
So we won't even really get to see that in advance. I mean, they may release it a little bit in advance of the meeting, but we won't actually get the opportunity to respond to that rule. So this is going to be out there in front of the public before we've really had to weigh in on the language of the rule, which is not the right way to go about these things at all.
Not at all.
No, it's yet again just another seeming element of these meetings are just a formality. We already know exactly what we want to do, so don't worry about it.
And here's, I know obviously we're upset, and I know Jeremy and Rob, I know you know this, but I hope the people listening realize, I know it can seem, you can get disappointed and upset and say, why do we even fight these things? But what you got to think about is, imagine if we hadn't been fighting for the last decade. I mean,
For real.
I cannot imagine the shape that the industry would be in if we had not been putting up the fight we had in the last decade. Another thing to look at, I mean, so just quickly, so USARK, we get engaged in 20 to 25 issues every year. We lose one. And of course, everybody gets upset and focuses on the one. It's kind of like Yelp reviews. You know, if you have a restaurant, nobody comments when the food's great. They comment when the food's bad. And it's kind of like everybody focuses on the one loss that we get every year. And obviously that's understandable. But, you know, we still, if we weren't fighting, imagine about those other 24 things that would have passed every year. And the same thing down here in Florida. I mean, if USARK Florida wasn't down here putting up the fight they are, who knows how many more dozens of species would have already been banned.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's such a solid point. I mean, I always reference, you know, that 10 plus years ago, HR 669 and SB 2811, when it's like, that's when the feds really, they showed their hand. They showed us exactly what they wanted to do. And that was everything non-native, ceasing entrance into the US. And, you know, after that, it's just been, okay, well, obviously that didn't work. So how can we attempt a different way to make that come to fruition? And, you know, I mean, kudos to you guys as always for being right there in those meetings, telling some people where they need to be in the most, well, hopefully the most PC way possible.
Yeah, I was at
today real well. There's a tail on that end.
I was at a conference with a bunch of government regulatory types recently, and they definitely gave full credit to USARK for slowing their agenda. And when they did that, they talked about the 2017 court decision, and everybody in the room looked at me. I mean, not that I was involved in that, but I was, you know,
you're the rep.
I face at the moment.
USARK there, so yeah, but it was kind of gratifying at the same time. So
what I'm hearing is, Daniel, we need to make sure that we get you like a Target shirt.
Wonder shirt.
Like
so he's got his button down over the top, and then when everybody looks at him, he just bring it on it right across the target.
Yep. Bring it.
Oh man,
we were discussing my wardrobe leading up. That was our main topic of conversation before we got started here. So.
Just a quick counterpoint on that. It's unfortunate that Daniel had to get all those eyes on him, but you know, you like to just look at him and say, if the federal government had not passed such an overreaching law, they wouldn't have gotten sued. Exactly. I mean, it was a problem. Florida had already addressed it. It should have stayed in Florida. If they hadn't applied it to the other 50 states, we wouldn't have sued them. So I want to point my finger at FWS.
Yep.
Point it right.
For real.
Finger pointing night.
Yeah. Sheesh.
But on a good side, we need to talk about the venomous bill.
Yeah, well, we
have had a small win this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't even consider it small for the native snakes in Florida. We had a bill introduced to the legislature in Florida that it makes it a felony to release a venomous snake or allow the negligent release or illegal or negligent escape or illegally sell a venomous snake. But the main issue we saw with this rule was that it didn't distinguish between native and non-native.
Right.
Mhm.
It technically would have prevented relocation of native venomous snakes.
And
If
researchers, right?
if you released a venomous snake for any reason. So, for instance, a lot of the research I've worked on, like with University of Central Florida, we were trapping and marking and releasing venomous snakes or implanting them with transmitters. We did radio telemetry with eastern diamondbacks. So there wasn't any exception in the language of the bill for research or humane relocation. So we kind of built a coalition with conservation groups here in Florida and some of the universities. And we were able to do kind of a little media campaign and get some public interest, and the legislators were flooded with phone calls for a little while, and they introduced an amendment to specify non-native species in the bill. And so the House voted for that amendment last week, and the Senate committee adopted it today. So that's now on both versions of the bill. So it looks like that's probably going to happen. So anyways, we're running all over. We have to deal with the legislature and our Fish and Wildlife Agency, but it's we do have success also.
And there's no debate on the fact that was only because of Daniel and USARK Florida. If he had a campaign, that never would have gone anywhere. So kudos to Daniel and USARK Florida. And another quick point, just to explain how apparently conservation works today. It's totally fine to kill snakes, but you're a felon if you try to relocate one. Apparently that's the new conservation.
Yeah, on FWC's website, it says that nuisance trappers must have a venomous license to relocate a snake, but they don't need one to kill a snake on site. And it actually says that on FWC's website. So one thing that we want to push for, and we've got kind of an effort going along with the Rattlesnake Conservancy on this one, is we would like for language to be adopted, making it so that nuisance relocators don't have to go through all of the hassle that venomous keepers do. Because the way it is now in Florida, to have a venomous license, you have to have a facility, you have to have a double entrance on your facility, you have to have very specific building codes, caging standards, and you also have to have 1,000 hours experience with each family that you want to keep. So it's very stringent requirements, but we don't feel like that's all necessary for a relocator who just wants to relocate a native venomous snake. There's no reason for them to have a facility to keep a snake. Yeah. So we believe that's all unnecessary. So we'd like to see FWC change the rule on that to allow relocators to do that more easily.
I just think that's like so interesting because like venomous snakes are native to Florida, so people run into venomous snakes just living in Florida. But if you want to be like, oh, I'm just going to move this out of my yard and move it over to the pond down the road, all of a sudden you need permits and the government's got to get involved. And it's like, what the heck? What is going on?
And, one of our native venomous snakes is the eastern diamondback. It's a candidate species for federal listing under the Endangered Species Act. So, they're literally telling people it's okay to kill this snake that obviously has conservation issues rather than allow people to relocate them.
Yeah, because if we hadn't got this changed, if they would have moved him, you would have made him a felony. They would have been felons at this point. They would have had a criminal record for moving a protected species.
Yeah, I want to go back to that because like it just shows that they have not put full thought into writing this bill because
then consult USARK Florida on it. Then ask.
Well, that's the thing. They introduced this as a legislative initiative. They first brought it up at the November FWC meeting. They didn't run it by any stakeholders first, so they introduced it to the legislature. So we have to find this out at the same time as the media and everybody else. And of course, they made a big media event out of Operation Viper. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be more news coming out about that. That'll be pretty interesting. But they basically wanted the opportunity for these kind of violations to be felonies because it's, you know, it's more fun for law enforcement to get a felony prosecution. It
Right.
makes bigger waves, but and there's no evidence that it actually discourages the crime. There's no data that shows that, but
Yeah.
you know, they did this without the input of stakeholders, and then it was going to have unintended consequences, which is what always happens when you don't let people know in advance. So FWC lobbied this bill, and the Sierra Club was also a listed lobbyist on this bill. So the Sierra Club, who's supposed to be for conservation, and they're lobbying for a bill that has obvious negative conservation impacts. And we realized what it was going to do, and we publicized that. But it's kind of an embarrassing situation for the government in Florida to have negative news stories about them and have their own universities and stuff calling them out. Why couldn't we just iron out these issues in advance rather than having to do a media campaign after you've already introduced bad legislation?
Well, I think two things on the joking side of that. That's pretty on brand for Florida as a whole, but but also, you know, I mean, to that exact point, it just creates a media frenzy, and you know, because media is digested by so many people, you just stir up that ignorant narrative of what's going on. You know, I mean, like I tell people in the reptile industry all the time, if your social media accounts are nothing but reptile people and you think everybody loves snakes and the world is wonderful, you're incredibly mistaken on how the rest of the world views us. You know, and if you look at any news article that goes up on Facebook or Instagram or whatever about reptiles, what are the comments? Why would anybody work with those things? Only good snake's a dead snake. All those comments. So if you're blind to that or unaware of that, you are missing how the rest of the world sees us. As expansive as the industry has become, especially over the last 10 years, we're still very much tabooed. You know, so being able to continue that narrative, that false narrative of, you know, what you guys deal with the FWC staff showing all of the horrible pictures of smuggling and all that stuff used to describe the captive industry. Like, it just fuels that narrative of we're these terrible people, and it's like, man, I'm just here in some jeans and a t-shirt trying to get my corn snakes to breed, man. Like,
he's really trying to stir us up with the pictures.
Yeah, you don't want to bring up terrapins, but Daniel, that's the man.
Not a good topic.
Oh man, you can call me. Bring up terrapins. It's
yeah. But you know, I mean, it's just a sad, consistent narrative that's, you know, certainly we hear about it more so in Florida because there's so much going on with FWC, but it's everywhere. You know, it's everywhere. I mean, we see with all of the traveling animal ban acts, you know, everything gets lumped in with the circus, and they show all this footage, you know, terrible footage from, you know, traveling circus acts and all that stuff. And you hear Sarah McLachlan in the back of your head, and you're just like, Jesus, will somebody freaking strike that song already? You know, but you're going to get us copyright stricken, Daniel.
I forgot about that. I'm trying, Daniel. I probably wasn't even in the right key. Yeah, it was nothing. It was nothing.
Donate on to Save the Puppies.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Oh man. But on a good side, I'll point this out just because I see him in the chat. We can shout out. We're weirdos to the world. Jay is here. Jay just had an incredibly successful 36-hour live stream challenge to raise money for USARK Florida.
Why is he awake?
I know. Yeah, exactly.
For real.
Exactly. And raised a little over $10,000, was it?
Yep.
$10,650.
Which
Jay, that was
freaking
all
amazing.
Jay. He stayed awake for 36 hours. He locked himself. Well, actually, I don't think he locked himself. Didn't his daughter? His daughter locked him in the lizard cage, so he couldn't even get out at the end of the thing. But he did all kinds of stuff to hurt himself for us. We felt so bad for him. He shaved his eyebrow. He ate peppers. He pulled his nose hairs out. He waxed himself. But every one of these things was when he hit a level of, people donating to USARK Florida, and he would do
That's
one of
great.
these things, and it motivated people to donate. And Jay, we just can't thank you enough. You are a special guy, and
He's a rock star.
he's
awesome.
helped us raise over $17,000 now with 2 different fundraisers.
Wow.
He just
That's
kind of
awesome.
came out of the blue for us. We didn't coordinate with him on the first one at all. He just said he wanted to do this for us, and he did it, and it raised $7,000 the first time. And oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
Kayla.
There's
There's
Kayla.
Kayla's here too. I saw her in the chat too. Yeah.
And Kayla and Max with Military Morphs
They're
help
awesome.
put this all together, and they are just, man, you want Max and Kayla on your side with anything. They are amazing people and
They're wonderful.
dynamic. They make
Mhm.
things happen. So
Absolutely. Yeah, no, so kudos to Jay and Max and Kayla for making that happen. Raising awareness. I talked to Jay, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and it just as a reptile industry person saying thank you, and hopefully that this kind of thing motivates other people to get involved and finding creative ways to raise money for USARK and USARK Florida, and because it's never going to stop. Unfortunately, and the battles are ongoing, and the lawsuits are not cheap. I think we've all talked about that at some point.
do you want to talk about the lawsuit a little bit, or
Does she want to?
Want is a strong word.
Or will she? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Talk about not cheap. Yes, we need a war chest. That's what we need. We need a war chest. The lawsuit currently is we are waiting for the judge to review all of our documentation. We have submitted our
motion for summary judgment?
I'm tired, guys. It's been a long day. I'm on a totally different playing field right now. A motion for summary judgment, and FWC has done the same. We've given it to the judge, and we're waiting for the judge to respond back to us. And he will review all the documentations, which at this moment in time, if you go to USARK Florida's webpage, you can also feel free to read through all the documentation. We have it all posted there for you. I believe even the depositions from FWC and all of our information is on there. And not only about the legal, something that people need to realize is when we get in lawsuits, it's not just paying lawyers. We've had to pay an economist. We've been paying biologists. I mean, we've been paying a full team, the invasive species expert. So we've been paying.
Feels like, don't forget.
Don't forget him. Poor Rick. Don't forget Rick. Rick Ingerman, he's awesome. So we've been paying all these other people for support and all the documentation and all the science and the facts to prove it. So there's a lot more than going into it. Everyone goes, well, you're just paying a lawyer. No, I wish it was that easy. I had no idea before getting into this lawsuit what it was all about. It's been an experience, I'll put it that way. But
should we say a little bit about what the lawsuit was about initially?
Sure, go right ahead.
But basically, in a nutshell, the lawsuit is over the way that the prohibited species rules were passed. It wasn't done with proper stakeholder input and proper evaluation of species from FWC, but and due process. And there's just a lot. You really should go to our website and actually read the motion, because there is so much interesting information in there about, what FWC, the ways that they didn't follow the law and all this. But also, so in the course of the research and discovery for this lawsuit, our legal team has discovered that they don't believe that FWC has the constitutional authority to regulate captive animals under human care, because the state constitution gives FWC authority over wild animal life. So we're saying, well, the animals that we're keeping are not wild animal life. It doesn't even say wildlife. It says wild animal life. So, if you're keeping and breeding corn snakes or, whatever, tegus, iguanas, bearded dragons, boas, anything, this is not a wild animal. So
Mhm.
so that's a very important component there also. So there's a lot of implications of this lawsuit depending on how it turns out.
That's interesting. And I wonder how they classify it, because like after a certain number of generations, things are generally considered domesticated. And for things like ball pythons, bearded dragons, corn snakes, chameleons, a lot of this stuff, we have to be well past that. Well past domestication.
There's some fun testimony in there about the definition of a standard cow. That's great reading, going back and forth on what a standard cow is. But I'm not kidding. So yeah, it's great reading when you get a chance. Toilet reading before
we're all legislative.
In the bathroom right now.
Yeah, right. We're all legislative reading should take place.
A lot of toilet visits to get through this.
Yeah, a lot of those.
How many pages is the motion?
The motion is, I think it's
50,
thought it was
50 something.
almost 60 pages.
So essentially, you need to go into the bathroom, and it's the it's the equivalent of forgetting you're in there while you're scrolling on social media. You're just flipping pages of nonsense and legal jargon.
It's not nonsense. It's actually a pretty good read. Yeah,
okay, all right.
And then when you read that, then you go to all the supporting documents.
Oh God.
It'll be made into a movie one day. So
for those, honestly, I think it should be.
So you need to bring a table into the bathroom with you to lay it all out.
Rob needs to read it and record it, and then people can just watch it on YouTube.
There you go.
In the British accent. In the British accent.
Hold on. I had somebody message me say, "Don't ever do that again." I'll do it on TikTok until it gets banned.
Oh, that'll be about 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeez. Oh my gosh, that's oh God, my head just hurts.
You could accompany him with music, and Rob could read it. That sounds.
I probably could.
With the accompanying sounds of smooth jazz played by brass band.
Hey, look, I'm gonna throw in my shameless music plug. Okay, so most people know that I worked with Tyrese, and he dropped a single a little earlier this year. It just hit number 8 on the Billboard R&B charts.
Nice.
So I'm super happy for that. So yeah, accompanying music can happen.
And he has also played on USARK Florida Productions also. So your career really started to ascend after that appearance on our Christmas special.
That might have been during a minor plateau of the ascension.
It's still on the ascension. They don't call that a
Yeah, he dropped a little bit. But
like the stock market,
It's catching a groove. That's what you're doing.
Oh gosh.
It's all part of the creative process.
Oh, is that what we're calling it now?
Yes, that's what I'm calling it.
Okay.
We'll go with that. We'll just call it that.
Perfect. Oh man. Okay, so deviating slightly, we're going to take a quick break just to run our sponsor ad really quick, and we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Gotcha.
Black Box Cages, located in Buford, Georgia, is your one-stop shop for all of your caging and rack needs. Owners Jen and Clint are at the helm of this fantastic company. With one of the shortest lead times in cage and rack manufacturing, Black Box can satisfy anyone's needs, from baby racks to V70s, arboreal and terrestrial caging to deep-fronted bioactive enclosures. You can find everything you need right here. New enclosure sizes and products are added frequently to their availability, so be sure to check back often. Black Box Cages have tons of customizing options for lighting and heating. Along with that, cages and racks can be stacked with metal stacking dowels, and all cage joints are dadoed for improved durability and stability. Most cage units are flat packed, but are pre-assembled prior to shipping to ensure a solid build every time. The Micro, XC18, XT3, Bio-G, and 3-stack V70 ship assembled, and all other racks are shipped freight and assembled. The XR16 and XR20 model racks allow keepers to mix and match tubs. Fitting both Vision and Freedom Breeder tubs, you can mix the V15, V18, and V35S tubs, or the FB5, FB8, and FB35CV-SC tubs. This kind of flexibility allows keepers to raise their animals from hatchling to juvenile or subadult size before needing to upgrade into adult caging. Don't just take our word for it. Go to their website to see countless customer reviews and review videos from keepers all over. To learn more about Black Box Cages, follow them on Facebook and Instagram at Black Box Cages, and of course their website, www.blackboxcages.com. Links to their socials and website will be available in the podcast description. Boom. So you guys know the deal. Go check out Black Box Cages. Go get yourself a new cage. Unless you're in Florida, you probably want to get less cages. But
Whoa. Rude.
Couldn't help it. It couldn't help. That's low hanging fruit right now for us all.
Listen, after today.
Oh man. So I want to deviate from Florida just a little bit and jump on with Phil and get an update on what's going on across the rest of the country and the other 49 states that we should know about or be prepared for.
The good states.
Smooth sailing.
Good
No
states.
No, on the legislative side, we stopped all the legislative matters this year thus far. So obviously something could still pop up, but most legislative sessions, so it's about the same as tax season.
Mm-hmm.
So most legislative sessions, you're looking January through May. So most of the bills we've seen, all the ones that we posted alerts for, we've stopped this year, which was eight or nine, I think, already this year. Federal session lasts 2 years. So this was the first year of a 2-year session.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some states that go all year. There's even some states that have 2-year sessions. So like North Carolina. So we could still see stuff in those sessions. But yeah, right now there's not much else going on. We're looking at action in Georgia, possibly because of the ban from last year.
Yep.
Yeah, other than that, not a whole lot going on. We may unfortunately see those Lacey Act amendments again. That's probably going to be a hot button in Congress. We don't know how it's going to be presented. May come as its own bill again, or it may be thrown into a package like we saw with the Competes Act. So, but I doubt we'll see anything on that route. It'll be the end of the year or early next year sometime. And if it comes up next session, so next year should be what they call a lame duck, because everybody's going to be worried about re-elections and all that jazz, and presidential campaign going on. So if we don't see it this year, it should bode well for us. But again, we just got to wait and see what happens.
That's when Florida gets to share its governor.
Don't you dare.
Yeah.
Don't you dare.
It's Florida in it. Florida.
Stop.
That's hard to say. Florida-ness.
Yeah.
Florida is huge right now in the news, you know.
I think
Yeah.
that we should just pour disinfectant on Florida and hope for the best.
Pour DeSantis everywhere. What's
Shut up.
happening?
If you take Florida and California, they can form their own island, and we'll push them off.
Yeah, just push them off
Yeah.
into the ocean.
I'm all for that exile.
Over there first, or California over here.
It's like Lord of the Flies.
Land mass in the way. We can narrow fit through the Panama Canal and just push it on.
Yeah. Hey, I'll meet you guys wherever you want to start sawing away at these things.
Yeah, for real.
Tugboat.
I'll bring a spoon
Yeah.
to start digging it out.
Well, Florida's going to flood one of these days, and California's going to earthquake itself off of the rest of us. So
This is true. Yeah, you know, when the berms start living in Ohio, Florida will be underwater. So
Maine,
it's
what do you
fine.
mean? You were there for that,
In
Jared.
Maine, yeah. In Maine.
Pythons in Maine. We had to listen to that. Climate change is so bad. We're going to have Burmese pythons in Maine. We better ban them.
Oh.
When I heard them say that, I literally was like, this is on public record. Like, this
Yeah.
is, you can look this up. This guy literally said that Burmese pythons with global warming will end up in Maine.
Yeah.
Are
Well,
you
let me tell
kidding
you
me?
something.
That happens.
Well,
If berms end up in Maine, humankind is going to have bigger issues than
That's
we're-
what I told him. I was
That
like,
was the
if berms end up in Maine, the rest of the United States is underwater. It won't matter then that there's snakes
That's
in
what we
in
said.
Maine.
Humans will have long been gone, so it's
Gone.
not going to be a concern. The berms can have
Right.
Maine because we
Yeah.
won't
The whole
Here you
eastern
go,
seaboard,
berms.
just take it.
Yeah.
have Maine. The last living human can bless it to him. There you
Oh.
go.
my
Oh
goodness.
gosh. Oh, people did not like the Cali and Florida combination.
California, the California and Florida crowd. We're just kidding, people. It's okay. Don't get mad. I'm kind of kidding.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's certainly a good thing to hear that on the rest of the front of all those bits of legislation that things have been squashed, and we can kind of
all the traveling animal, they're all taken
They
care of.
screw up when they list reptiles. They're dummies.
Yep.
This guy.
True.
They only pass when they keep the reptiles on. We even fought one in Connecticut that didn't have reptiles on it, and I testified and said, "We don't care if it doesn't have reptiles. We're still gonna fight it.
we're
because
still here.
We're
Yep,
gonna come
'cause
back
they
and
could
get
amend it afterwards.
Here's an awesome snippet that actually came from that Connecticut hearing. So one of the committee members actually said, because there were groups like AZA, Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and the rodeo groups, they were looking for exceptions from the bill. And one of the legislators actually told him, he's like, don't ask for an amendment. You either oppose it or you support it. Because if you look for an exemption, they're going to come back and they're going to screw you next session or in a later
Yep.
session. You know, a legislator actually told him that and said, listen,
Wow.
stop asking for amendments. They're going to come for you sooner or later. So I hope that I want to get that video out of that hearing and post it, because that's exactly what happens. Because we saw in some of the other states too, where, you know, the rodeo, it's a rodeo of all people. If they don't realize they're a target, I mean, they're just,
Yeah.
they got to wake up. But again, they're looking for exemptions to excuse them for the current legislation. But if that passes, then they're just going to come pick them off. So
Mhm.
that's
Yep.
not doing that, folks.
That's why we always say it's easier to pass an amendment than it is to pass the initial piece of legislation.
Oh, yeah.
Stop it.
Sheesh. That's it, rodeo guys. You need the reptile folks in your corner.
They really do. You know, it's disappointing sometimes to see these folks that really, we have aligned interest on a lot of things,
Yeah.
and that certain groups are just totally willing to throw another group under the bus to
Mhm.
save themselves sometimes. They're going to come for all of you in the end.
Right.
Yeah.
And AZA, I mean, AZA opposes these bills when they don't have an exemption. And then, you know, when they're exempt, obviously they're just quiet about it. But then they get all upset. Oh, I don't believe you're going to try and ban this for AZA. Do you know who we are?
Do you know who we are? It's like, yeah, you guys are just
You know I'm Dan Ash.
slightly more organized than us.
Yeah. Here's a great question. Why can't we have regulations based on peer-reviewed science?
Science doesn't exist anymore. That's the problem. I mean, science is lost in the world of journalism. Journalism doesn't exist anymore. And I say that, obviously there's good journalists. There is some stuff out there, but science is the same problem. I mean, science is, so much of it is biased and it has predetermined outcomes. So that's the problem with science. You can't say, well, science said this, because unfortunately, like we saw with if people aren't familiar with the Python study released by the United States Geological Survey. So that was science that said Burmese pythons could live in Maryland. I mean, come on. That is not science. That is the biggest piece of bogus BS there ever was.
Garbage in is garbage out.
And honestly, I mean, we're snake people. So over 60% of people hate snakes, so they don't get it. But honestly, that's the kind of thing that should upset all Americans. When the federal government tells you that Burmese pythons can live in Maryland, what are they lying to us about with COVID and everything else going on? I mean, why should we listen to the federal government about the serious stuff when they're telling us Burmese pythons can live in Maryland? I mean, it's scary. And we know that was wrong, but you know, most of us don't understand if, you know, CDC gets on and says something. I'm sorry, I'm getting on. I'm going to shut up for a little bit.
You know, the sad thing about science, one thing I say, science is not the problem. It is scientists. Because the scientific method works, scientific process does work. But the problem is what I see, especially with invasive species biologists, is that their whole purpose seems to be to produce media talking points. So they get grant money because everybody has become terrified of invasive species. I mean, they've got people believing that iguanas are just flinging salmonella all over the place, and they're gonna, you know, bite your children and all this crazy stuff. And these points, any little instance that these scientists can come up that are really anecdotes, they use that to justify whatever they want to justify. But the problem is that scientists don't just get to study whatever they want to study. You have to get funding, and that's from grant money. And you get grant money for things that society cares about. So when everybody's all worked up about an issue, there's usually more grant money to study it. Well, it doesn't do invasive species biologists to come up with things that make invasive species seem like no big deal. They've got to make them seem like the worst thing in the world. But what they're also doing is that they're ignoring certain points where invasive species might be, or non-native species, I should say, are sometimes having beneficial impacts. They're being eaten by native animals, or they're providing habitat. We have invasive plants that are providing habitat. So, the whole scientific process, it does work, but it's not allowed to work a lot of the time.
Right, exactly. And that's that comes up to this point here. The point should be peer-reviewed science and not paid outcome by a single source. And sadly, that's what ends up rearing its head into so many of these situations. And then or on the other side of it, you get some science that actually can come out, but as soon as the documentation is finished, it goes up for bid and then gets edited. So things look like it's not what they really are, and then that just creates even more of a problem. But at the end of the day, it's big business, big money, rules everything, and that's
it's like when they did the survey on what Burmese pythons are eating in Florida, and they found out it's like 60% cotton rat, which is an invasive species of rat. They're not eating as many of these protected birds as they're saying that they are. But if you were to say, hey, look, we want to look at how many endangered birds cats are killing, it's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe just don't talk about that one, because there's not this vested interest in actually protecting native wildlife. It's actually just what can we scare people about and get a headline, because if you can get a headline, you can get views, and if you can get views, you can get paid.
Sure.
And
some of the same papers, actually, they document certain impacts, and those things are just ignored. For instance, we posted on our social media pages a few months ago, there was a paper on American crocodiles, and it said that crocodiles had a positive impact from Burmese pythons because pythons had put a big dent in the raccoon population.
So I remember that. Yeah.
Raccoons are what we call subsidized mesopredators. Subsidized meaning they benefit from humans. So having humans around has made raccoon populations go up. We eliminate their natural predators. Like we had red wolves in Florida. We had more Florida panthers. So we had predators for raccoons. Raccoons like to eat human garbage and all that stuff. So we have way more raccoons than we're supposed to have. Well, the pythons come in and they eat a bunch of raccoons. So in some ways, they're returning the balance. And what was happening in the Everglades is that raccoons were eating almost 100% of American crocodile eggs. And when the berms had a big impact on the raccoons, suddenly baby crocodiles were hatching. We started seeing baby and juvenile and now subadult and even adult crocodiles that are hatching and growing up because of the impacts of the berms. And this was documented in a paper by Frank Mazzotti and a bunch of other crocodilian specialist biologists, but they never seize on points like that from these papers. It's always the bad news.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that we're this far past it, but we still get the glimmers and hear the people talking about USGS science from however many years ago. It's like, I mean, it tells you nobody's paying attention. Nobody's actually looking at what the real facts are, what that data would actually have meant for the rest of the country.
It's crazy. Again, state agencies are still using that. FWC used it 2 years ago. So Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission cited that USGS study. Georgia DNR just cited that USGS study in the ban that they passed. Alabama cited it 2 years ago. I mean, it's crazy that these state agencies are still citing that science. Even, I mean, they have to know that how flawed it is. I mean, we had non-reptile keepers come out and post. Rick Ingeman was one of them. These are people who have nothing to do. They're making no money from the reptile world. And they were just so upset that science this bad was represented as fact, that, you know, there were a dozen or more papers that came out and said this USGS study was bogus, and you still have state agencies citing it. It's scary.
Yeah.
What a biologist recently told me is that the problem with a lot of this invasive species modeling and stuff is that it just doesn't compare with actually testing it with real animals. And what Savannah River Ecology Lab did with Burmese pythons, they actually put them in an outdoor enclosure in South Carolina, and guess what? They all died in the wintertime. So that was the real proof right there. They can't survive a South Carolina winter. They can't even survive a Central Florida winter.
Yep.
So
You guys barely survive Central Florida winter.
especially this one.
Winter, give me a break.
Yeah, meanwhile, Phil's like, I'm walking on my pool. It's all frozen.
I don't have a pool. I got
A pond.
Please
Close enough. If you take a dip in it, it's a pool.
True. Stinky fish poop pool.
Oh gosh.
Somebody swims in it.
Okay, so here's a good question. How much money does FWC get from the feds to combat invasive species? How much do they get for the python hunt every year? It's all about money. So I don't know if you guys know those numbers, but I think that's a solid point. Is it's invasive species, as you said, money's going to get thrown at that because it's a buzz topic.
There could be some federal grant money, but it's mostly funded by the taxpayers of Florida.
It's state
It's
money.
state money.
Yeah.
And the governor actually gives them a budget, and they have an astronomical. I was just talking.
It's
about
hundreds
the
of
other-
millions of dollars.
Yeah, hundreds of millions.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, that's the total.
Yeah.
I
For
want.
FWC.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, I'm not certain off the top of my head. I want to say it's maybe 6 million just for Burmese python eradication.
Wow.
So
I just need 50 grand to pay off student loans, man.
and that's just one species.
That's-
So
yeah.
every year they can
Jesus.
ask for more. So FWC can ask the state legislature for so many millions for tegu eradication or Burmese python eradication. So those species that are a real problem, you know, they'll ask specifically rather than just asking, say, hey, we need $20 million for invasive species issues. You know, they'll ask for so much for certain species. But yeah, it's many millions of dollars that they're getting in state taxes. Yep.
Jeez, man, that's just wild. It blows my mind that it's all come to this.
Damn it.
I should point out one more thing with pythons. You know, you'll probably hear it reported that they've eaten all the mammals. All the mammals are gone.
Oh, right.
They stopped studying the mammal populations like 3 years ago. So from all anecdotal reports I'm getting and my own observations, the mammals are increasing. And Phil and I were in South Florida last year, and we saw mammals, didn't we?
I see raccoons every time
Yeah.
I drive the road in the Everglades.
We saw
so I don't know.
I
I don't know why they hide from the scientist. Numbers haven't declined. I'm not saying that these are anecdotal. You know, this isn't scientific, but sightings or anything. I'm not documenting all of it, but I'm just my personal experiences is the last 3 times that I've gone to the Everglades, I've seen raccoons. So
Right? You see a guy with a clipboard and you're like, this is for the census, isn't it? No, I'm not home. I'm not home.
Yeah, right.
And the raccoons are learning to prey on python nests also.
Yep.
Yeah.
Raccoons aren't stupid animals. They
True.
figure things out. So when they have a large predator, they're going to figure out how to deal with it. And that's generally the way things work in ecology. It finds a balance. And it's not that we want invasive species here, but sometimes we're in a connected global community. We have trade. So regardless of what we shut down, we're not going to stop worldwide trade. The Cuban tree frog came here, as far as we know, early 20th century or earlier, and it came on like shipments of goods, probably from the Caribbean, from Cuba. That was probably going to happen no matter what at some point, especially with the warming climate. This is just a frog that's going to be here, and there's like nothing we can do about it.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point. Is I have a friend who lives in Orlando, but used to live in Miami and worked in logistics. And he was like, we would make notes whenever anybody would be like, "Hey, there's this weird lizard on this plant that just came in. What do we do with it?" And they're like, "Oh, let it go." Whatever. So it's really easy to point the finger at the pet industry, because that's just where we see all these animals, and nobody's paying attention to a cargo ship or something that's coming in that way, so it's like, yes, what's the likelihood of a berm coming in on a ship? But so many of these other species that do make their way here, a lot of times is not solely from, or not even at all from, the pet industry. We just get the giant target put on us.
So there are different reasons for introductions, and I
cane toads.
yeah. Sometimes it was intentional by people that were not reptile keepers for sure, but we should kind of segue this into saying too that we're not against all regulation. I mean, there was obviously a problem with Burmese pythons, and the state did come up with a solution to address that, which initially was the Reptiles of Concern program, which kind of morphed into the conditional species program. And it implemented caging standards, microchipping requirements, and keepers had to be inspected. And that largely eliminated the Burmese python as a common pet species in Florida. But the problem is that as long as these stories are perpetuated in the news and everything, there's just this continual call to solve the problem again and again and again. So every new political regime has to come in and act like they're doing something to address the problem. When we had a good solution, and we did ask for tegus to be added to this conditional species program
for over a decade, right?
Yeah.
Dating back to 2009
Yes.
and several times since. We asked for tegus to be regulated, and it never happened.
So they went essentially from being a common pet animal to a prohibited species almost overnight. And the commissioners even said in the meeting when they passed the prohibited species rules, you can keep your pet lizards. We're not trying to take anybody's lizards away. And we now know that that's simply not true.
Not true.
They take lots of people's lizards away because they passed caging requirements that were almost impossible to follow for a lot of people. And they also set a deadline, and a lot of people didn't even know that this was happening. So they set a deadline, and they've told tons of people since then, you've missed the deadline, so you can't get the permit. And we don't even know all the people that this has happened to, but we have very specific reports to us where FWC has told people, you've missed the deadline, you can't get a permit. And we've had to get involved in some of those situations. With Green Day the iguana last year, we helped with a media campaign that basically saved the life of this iguana that was the mascot of a park in Cape Coral, Florida, where an FWC inspector came in and literally told the park, I'm going to confiscate and euthanize your lizards because this is a prohibited species and you've missed the deadline and there's nothing that can be done.
Wow.
And I made some calls to FWC staff, and we got some newspaper articles, and FWC didn't call me back on it, but they sure fixed the problem when the newspaper articles came out. And the headline said that FWC was going to euthanize the mascot.
Yeah.
But we're dealing with another situation now with someone who has a 23-year-old iguana. He didn't know anything about the rules. He's had these lizards forever, and they only know about him because he microchipped his iguana when they asked people to microchip iguanas so they could figure out whose they were if they escaped. But they used that to find him. It was basically a registration, and now they're trying to take his lizard away. So there are business implications of all these industries and aren't able to operate, things like that, businesses, but there's also the real pet level, that somebody could come and take your cherished pet away. And that's where it's really sad. I mean, he's got pictures of his kids when they were young with these animals, and his kids are grown up now. and now they're going to come take away this lizard because they passed a rule without proper evaluation and stakeholder input, and he didn't even know anything about it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that when we talk about this will literally impact the everyday pet keeper. All of these things, and I think about, like, when I was living in Massachusetts, trying to find the website and the page to look at with all of that information. It's so buried. It's impossible. I mean, even when I moved to North Carolina and had to apply for this permit or that person for native species, it's like I got to go to this page, then to this page, and I got to click this link, and then if I miss that one bit of subtext, now I've totally screwed up the application, and blah blah. Everything is so challenging to find. If you think about that mom whose kid just really wanted that leopard gecko or whatever, they're not thinking about that.
Yeah,
not at all.
And I've done permits in like 6 different states, I think, at this point, and I can tell you without a doubt, Florida is the absolute worst system to navigate of any of them. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous. Their online system doesn't work. Their mail-in system doesn't work. Sometimes they make you mail something in and print something out online for different permits. And it's just crazy. And I'm waiting on a permit that I applied for in June for animals that I've had over a decade, that I've had multiple permits. And I'm waiting for that was applied through their online system. So we have like a non-functional system here. And, from the normal pet keeper's perspective, like you said, people don't know where to find these regulations. But not only that, every article that came out about the prohibited species rules quoted commissioners in the meeting saying, if you have a pet lizard, a pet tegu, or an iguana, you can keep it. They're not taking away your lizards. So some people just thought that was the truth, that they were fine.
Yep.
Well,
right.
And the other problem is some of these people are just, like he said, they're pet keepers. They're not up on all these rules and regulations. You get a cat or you buy a dog, you buy whatever it is. 10 years down the road, you went to the pet store and bought it. They didn't do a big media campaign. The news wasn't saying, oh, by the way, on this date, if you have a pet iguana, you need to go get it microchipped. There was none of that. We have people all the time. They're clueless. They have no idea. And they're like, well, I bought it 10 years ago. I'm just coming in to get a new light bulb. I didn't know.
Yep.
Yep.
No clue. And they're like, now, by law, they have to give that animal up because they missed a deadline.
Yeah. And that's just incredibly disheartening. And yeah, you're exactly right. These pet keepers, they're not in the know. They're not paying attention to industry. Because they've got one animal, one iguana, one bearded dragon, one ball python. So why the heck are they're not looking at Morph Market? They're not doing any of that stuff. It's incredibly frustrating for sure.
And you feel bad because a lot of times it's not only just the parents, it's the kids.
The kids. Yeah, exactly.
These kids, this has been their lizard that they've had in their life forever. And some of these kids have allergies. So this is it's the only pet they can have. And now they can't have it anymore.
And this is the kind of stuff that Elizabeth and I go to bed thinking about every night, literally, these situations.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. But oh gosh. All right, guys. Well, we're winding down. We're hitting our hour mark. I've kept you long enough. Phil has been very straight-faced and stern. I tried to get him to wear a straw hat, guys, but look at him. Look at him. Now he's scrunch-faced and mad.
Oh.
I have a really great photo of Phil sitting next to Santa Claus, and he's not happy.
No, that's not a good photo at all. Unflattering.
We have others too. We'll share with you.
Oh, perfect.
Rob, you got to bring us around. Pick us up. Let's end on a good note.
Yeah, let's end this on a good note for sure.
Something good in here, one of you guys. Come on.
Something good. Oh my goodness. I don't know.
What do you got?
I'm trying to think.
Come on.
as far as I don't know, legislative stuff is. I'm just like I'm
You
just
can
thinking about.
pitch up a
I'm
subsidy
thinking.
Yeah, talk about baby scrub pythons. I fucked this up for Phil.
No.
Illegal in Florida.
That now you're gonna get me all pissed off now because I had so many people that were like, why don't you come down to Florida? I was like, well, they just banned like prohibited scrubs, so now if there was any possibility of me coming down there, it can't happen. It just can't happen.
I got to tell you something about the scrub python map that they made for Florida. They showed where it could occur in Florida, and the places where they said it could occur were places that stay warmer than the surrounding landscape. So they did it based on temperature, but the places that stay warmer are cities.
Cities. Yeah, I was just gonna say cities.
There's a map that has all these dots in these major urban areas in Florida, and they're showing that's where scrub pythons could establish. And it's like, come on.
No, people are gonna kill them.
I'm all for watching scrub pythons just knock people out from light poles.
Yeah.
They're going to be in the streets.
But this is like why our native snakes can't even survive in Florida. This is why Indigo snakes are gone everywhere, because they can't live in cities.
Yeah.
At the end of this, you need to insert either like a chicken playing a piano video or one of those videos where the cats try and jump and don't reach where they're trying to get. There has to be.
You guys now have a view into
downery. We need some pick uppery.
You guys now all have a view into Phil's playlist for "I Need a Pick Me Up" on YouTube.
Well, let me tell you what Phil's playlist was today that I heard. It was like Neil Young's "Oh Man, Take a Look at My Life. I'm a Lot Like." That's what we listened to leaving the meeting today. Is that not true?
I don't even know.
That was our pick me up after the meeting today.
I wasn't paying attention.
Oh my gosh!
I was thinking about the when I was still in Massachusetts and I was like 16 or 17 years old. I had gone through all of the process to get permits for chameleons because I didn't know that they were illegal. I bought them when I was on vacation in Connecticut, brought them back to Massachusetts. I had them for years, and then I brought them to the vet because he ended up getting an eye infection. And the vet's like, hey, you're not supposed to have these here. And so I was like, okay, I'll get a permit. I go to the thing. They're like, oh, you don't need a permit. I'm like, yeah, but the law says that I need a permit. And they're like, yeah, but they're going to change that soon. So just don't worry about it. And I was like, well, I don't want you to come in here and taking my pet that I love dearly. So how about you just give me a permit? And they're like, well, you got to have an educational business if you're going to get a permit. So me and my mom went out and made an educational business and we got our permits. And then after that chameleon ended up passing away after a few more years, I wanted to change my permit from Jackson's chameleons to Veileds and Panthers so I could have some variety in my educational programs. And I go up to the office and I am like, hey, I have my permits for Jackson's chameleons, but I really want to get a permit for the Veileds and for Panthers. I've got my check here. I know the whole system. I have all the paperwork filled out. Here you guys go. The guy hands it back to me. He's like, no, just get out of here. We're changing it soon. And I was like, you guys told me that 6 years ago when I applied for the first permit in the first place, and it hasn't changed yet. So no, how about you take my money? And then you know what he told me? He told me to white out Jackson's chameleon on the permit and write Veiled chameleon and Panther chameleon on it.
I mean, that's a perfect example, though. I mean, obviously, with a stupid law, they're not worried about enforcing it. So,
what's the point? What is the point?
Well, one thing that we can be assured of here in Florida, though, is if there is a stupid law, they will enforce
they'll enforce it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll be like, sorry, today is mac and cheese day, so you didn't bring mac and cheese to the commissioner, so we can't give you your permit today. You're going to have to come back on grilled.
Oh, you've been here. You saw it.
Oh, I saw it.
Awesome.
I've heard about the hobnobbery, okay?
The hobnobbery. Oh, jeez.
No mac and cheese, no talking.
No speak for you.
No.
Yeah.
You
it's bad.
Be on silent today.
Yeah, I don't know if it was pick uppery, but at least there's a couple people laughing right now. But it was not bring downery.
Can I kind of close with something kind of? Well, I just think it's something people should know about this guy here. He works so hard. He travels all over the country. He's down here in Florida, working for us. Even though we have USARK Florida, Phil is still down here way more than he wants to be, helping with what's going on in Florida. At our last tag, we all were leaving the meeting and we were all going out to eat, and Phil couldn't do it because he was, as soon as he got out of the FWC tag in person, he goes out and logs online in the lobby of the hotel to participate in a meeting online for New Mexico.
It's a hearing.
A hearing. Yeah. So he's walking out of one meeting to participate in a hearing in another state, while we're all like going out to eat. And that just seems to be Phil's life. So I just want everybody to know how dedicated he is. And people don't all get to see this, but we've gotten to see it. And it's pretty inspiring.
Put up with us way more than he wants to.
Thanks, Daniel. And you know, there used to be, back when I was a kid, there was, I want to be like Mike. Nobody wants to be like Phil.
Nobody wants to be like Phil.
I wish I had Phil's determination.
I just want Phil's sexy body.
That's the part of this episode that's going to get clipped. I guarantee it.
Is that something you can't say?
No, you can say it.
You can
say
it.
The internet is going to
Maybe
replay
I said
it.
that the wrong way. I meant like I would like to have a body like Phil's, not that I literally want.
It's too late. It's too late,
It's out on
Daniel.
the internet now. Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
At 109, 110, an hour 10 was like.
I'll tell you what. I'm going to clip it for you, Daniel, and I'll send it right to you.
Are you worried about my future career or something?
No, because I'm not clipping. I'm not going to clip it to delete
I
it.
don't want that on my show.
I'm not going to clip it to delete it. I'm going to clip it to repost it.
Oh yeah.
Play it over and over and over. You gotta play it with.
Do you want to hear the context of why this was said? You need to listen to the most recent episode of Reptile
It's
Talk.
going to be the best promo ever.
Yeah.
Jeremy's gonna make a song out of it.
You know, the fun thing about this anyway, God. I think I said earlier when we were saying, should we really do this? And I can't remember what mischievousness we were engaging in at the time, but I was like, well, we're not the government, at least.
Yeah, for real. For real.
So we have to hang out with all the stuffy government types, and I'm sure they don't all want to be stuffy all the time, but they kind of have to be. You know, it's their job. Yeah. But at least we get to let loose. Reptile people are fun people, you know. So
it's true. We have a long history of being obnoxiously fun. That's
absolutely.
Or just obnoxious. Sometimes
true.
So the lead fun gets left
leave
off.
the fun in there.
Yeah, keep the fun.
It's going to be obnoxiously fun today.
I've been called out.
Oh, God. All right. So before we totally wrap this up, just want to give a shout out. Natalie's Reptiles just dropped $2.
Natalie!
Thank you.
You're the man, Phil.
Rock star. She helps out in the Midwest. She's in Michigan, helps out at the Tinleys, and does a heck of a job on her own. Talking about USARK Michigan, local Michigan show. So thank you, Natalie.
Heck
thank
yeah.
You.
And
You're
then
absolutely right.
One final question that I think we can end on, because I think this is actually pretty interesting. Kayla from Military Morse said, I also saw the UK is starting a UK ARC. Are there any details on that?
Yes. I mean, there was an EU ARC for a while. So I've actually talked to at least 6 or 7 people in the last 10 years who said, we want to have something similar, and I've sent them directions on how to go about it, and it's never gone to fruition. So if there is a UK ARC starting up, I just talked to somebody a couple weeks ago who was interested in doing that. I hope they get it going and are successful.
They have an Instagram page.
Yeah.
So I think that's over there, pretty good start.
Over there, they have an issue with the RSPCA, kind of like we have issues with HSUS and PETA and the ASPCA here. So they've got the same problem over there. WPA, World Protection Association, is another issue. They're global. So they've got the same animal rights problems over there that we do here in the U.S. So I wish you luck.
Cool. All right, guys. On that note, good luck to the UK.
Thank you so much.
Natalie, you're awesome. And thank you, Daniel, Phil, and Elizabeth, for joining us and informing us and apparently bringing us all down only to lift us up at the very end.
All down all the time.
Oh man. Well, thank you guys so much
Yes, thank
for
you
this
very
update
much.
on everything. I know people are going to be talking about it and sharing it, so it's definitely good to get some solid information out to everybody.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks,
Good
Jeremy.
night, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.